God saw what you cried into your pillow. He's not exposing you, he's freeing you. What you hid beneath the sheets now screams for light. Heaven heard what you begged for in the dark. Now it answers in fire. God is coming for the ghosts you sleep beside. The lie you sleep with is louder than your heartbeat. That wasn't rest. It was survival under satin. You decorated your prison with rose petals. He watched them undress your spirit before your body. The silence in your room carries evidence. Your bed remembers the ones who didn't love you back. You forgave them quietly, but God didn't. That love was lust dressed as prayer. You kept letting them in, hoping they'd finally see your soul. God waited beside your nightstand every time you chose them over him. You called it passion. Heaven called it decay. The scent still lingers, but not of love. You stitched yourself back together between stolen kisses. That mirror saw every tear you swallowed whole. The walls know your truths better than your tongue. You didn't sin. You sought softness in sharp hands. What was sacred became stained. Your spirit left the bed long before your body did. You made space for someone who never made room for your worth. You moaned through your ache, hoping it would become love. You undressed to feel something. God watched you disappear. What happened in that room still haunts your breath. They called it love. Your soul called it war. You let them stay, even as your light dimmed. You laid down beside betrayal and begged it to stay. The sheets told stories your lips could never confess. You wept into the pillow and God caught every drop. You kissed your way into deeper wounds. The perfume didn't cover what broke inside you. You gave them your temple, they left you in ruins. Love never asked you to shrink. That wasn't love. God's exposing what you thought you buried in bed sheets. You forgot your name in someone else's hunger. This wasn't intimacy. It was erasure. They didn't touch your body. They tore through your spirit. The room still holds your last no that turned into silence. You survived nights that would have killed softer souls. That wasn't your guilt to carry. You mistook pain for passion again. The bed knows your secrets. Heaven knows your soul. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. You kept the light off to forget your reflection. They said they loved you right before they disappeared. That room remembers more than you do. But God remembers everything and still chooses to restore you. If this touched your soul, don't scroll, comment your favorite quote and subscribe for more. You called it romance. Your spirit called it rescue. You let them take, hoping they'd stay. That bed became a battlefield your heart never recovered from. You made a home out of heartbreak. God's not punishing you. He's pulling you out. The ache in your chest is truth waking up. They memorized your body, not your soul. You kept loving them, even while dying in pieces. That room was your altar, and your undoing. You laid down beside lies wrapped in warm arms. The moan you made wasn't pleasure. It was grief. They never deserved your softness. You gave holy things to hollow people. You dressed your trauma in lingerie. You let them in while your soul was screaming out. You slept beside betrayal and kissed it goodnight. You mistook addiction for attachment. God saw you numb yourself just to be held. That door opened to everything but peace. You stayed longer than love did. Your body still flinches when the memory touches it. You prayed after, not before, and still God stayed. The pillow heard your truth before your mouth ever did. You bled under a smile. The sheets don't lie, even when you did. You let them in, thinking you were the one being saved. That bed carried more grief than comfort. They didn't kiss you, they consumed you. Every time you said, "I'm fine," your spirit dimmed. You made lust sound like love to survive. God whispered stop. You moaned over his voice. You cried out after midnight. That was your altar call. You thought this was your only way to feel wanted. That night became your turning point, and you knew it. They left, but your shadow still sleeps with them. You begged for love in the arms of the unready. God's exposing what kept you bound in silk chains. You longed to be seen. not stripped. The pleasure was loud, but the pain was louder. You forgot how to breathe without apology. They touched your skin, but never asked about your scars. You silenced your soul just to hear their praise. You unzipped your worth, hoping they'd finally stay. You let their hands write shame across your body. That wasn't passion. That was permission to forget your pain. They never made space for your heart, only your hips. You broke your own heart, pretending it didn't hurt. You weren't dirty. You were desperate for warmth. You called their name. God called yours louder. Your worth never needed their hands to prove it. The bedroom became a confession booth for sins you didn't commit. They slept, but you stayed awake, haunted by the silence. You learned to fake peace just to feel safe. You said yes because saying no felt dangerous. The room remembers what your memory tries to erase. You lost yourself in shadows trying to find love. You gave your light to someone who worshipped darkness. The mirror still trembles with your unsaid truth. They didn't leave. They revealed they never stayed. You folded your spirit neatly beside their desire. Your eyes said, "Save me." They said, "Stay." The mattress absorbed every unspoken ache. You lay beside them, but slept beside shame. You traded truth for touch. They unmade you in the name of love. The ceiling still holds your silent prayers. You wept into the pillow you bought together. God didn't forget the moment you couldn't breathe. You weren't weak. You were desperate to feel whole. That bed was never holy, but your soul always was. They called you crazy, but God called you chosen. You let them rewrite your worth in whispers. You stayed in places your heart had already left. You made excuses for their absence. You didn't lose yourself. You were never seen. You still flinch when love comes near. You kissed your pain and called it commitment. You needed healing, not hands. You let them rewrite your value in lust's language. You gave the sacred to the unready. You stayed hoping they'd one day see the real you. God isn't exposing you to shame you, but to save you. That bedroom wasn't a sin, but it held your suffering. You still carry echoes of the night they disappeared. You offered your soul, they gave their shadow. You woke up emptier each time. You stitched your dignity back every morning. That ache wasn't desire, it was a warning. The sheets still hold your ghost. You weren't broken. You were buried under false love. God's pulling you from the ashes of that room. You covered pain in perfume. You smiled while bleeding inward. You craved meaning. They gave you memory. You kissed them goodbye, but left your voice behind. The walls witnessed the unraveling. You begged to be loved without conditions. What they did in the dark is coming into light. You never needed them. You needed God. If this touched your soul, don't scroll, like, comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more. The room was quiet, but your soul was screaming. You made intimacy out of apology. You didn't need a lover. You needed rescue. You erased yourself to fit inside their want. The pillow still holds your secrets. You whispered, "I'm okay," through clenched ribs. You weren't touched. You were taken. They loved your body, not your becoming. You let them stay while you disappeared. You called it healing, but it hollowed you. You wept into the mattress and called it mercy. The bedroom wasn't broken, but you were. You played strong so they'd never know you shattered. You became the silence you feared. You wore regret like perfume. They tasted your pain and still asked for more. Your innocence was never meant to bleed there. You opened your heart in a house built on lies. They didn't destroy you. They revealed the wound. You gave love. They returned hunger. That room holds your last surrender. You weren't searching for pleasure. You were chasing belonging. You weren't weak. You were tired of being invisible. They watched you fall and called it romance. You buried your truth beneath the bedsheets. You undressed for acceptance. They never knew your name, only your silence. That night changed the way you prayed. You weren't ashamed of your body, just who held it. You believed the lie because it came with touch. You forgot how to speak softness to yourself. You stopped asking to be seen. You held your breath for too long inside that room. You didn't open your legs, you opened your longing. You broke into pieces just to fit in their arms. You gave your yes because you feared being left. The ceiling knows the sound of your breaking. You waited for someone to choose your soul, not your skin. You forgave them, but your body still remembers. That bed became your battlefield of worth. You survived nights love should have protected you from. You kept secrets to protect their name, not your healing. You stayed naked, but never known. You weren't addicted to them. You were starving for meaning. You mistook possession for devotion. God isn't punishing you. He's pulling you out of patterns. You pretended to enjoy it just to feel wanted. You gave all and still felt like nothing. They wanted your fire, not your story. That room holds echoes of your lost self. You kept begging to be seen by blind hearts. You wrapped shame in silence. You disappeared behind every yes you didn't mean. You turned your pain into a performance. You prayed before they came over. You wept when they left. That bedroom knew your name before you remembered it. You kept hoping they'd love you whole. You didn't sin. You surrendered to survive. You made peace with the prison. They wanted your body, but never touched your soul. You kept trying to bloom in a room of shadows. You said never again and meant it this time. You gave away the divine and got nothing eternal. You curled into yourself, hoping to disappear. You wore their absence like a second skin. That room doesn't own your story anymore. They saw you undress, but never watched you fall apart. You slept beside regret, wrapped in desire. You forgot what it feels like to be held by love. You played their games just to be chosen. You cried through the kiss. They liked your silence. God missed your voice. You traded safety for seconds of feeling. You let them consume you, hoping it would heal you. You didn't fall. You were pushed into loneliness. You begged for connection, but got confusion. You offered heaven. They brought shadows. You hid your holiness beneath their hunger. The room was dark, but your soul still glowed. You gave permission while silently pleading for mercy. You tried to mean more than the moment. Your tears baptized the pillow. You said, "I love you," just to feel less empty. You made brokenness look beautiful. God isn't exposing you. He's rescuing your truth. That bed taught you everything love was not. You were loyal to someone who fed off your silence. The ache wasn't punishment. It was prophecy. You wrapped your ache in silk sheets. You made yourself small just to be held. That room still smells like what you never deserved. You let them dim you so they could shine. You cried with your back turned. You weren't asking for too much, just enough. God kept count of the nights you lost yourself. You looked for forever in fleeting hands. You changed your shape just to be wanted. The mirror never lied, only you did. You kissed goodbye the girl who just wanted to be loved. If this touched your soul, don't scroll, comment your favorite quote and subscribe for more. You shared a bed, but slept alone in spirit. You gave away pieces of yourself just to be remembered. You didn't enjoy it, you endured it. They praised your body, but ignored your breaking. The silence, after still screams, louder than the touch. You gave your soul in whispers. They replied with absence. The bed remembers who you became to survive them. You touched the edge of yourself and called it intimacy. You bled into the sheets and smiled through it. You craved gentleness. They gave you games. You begged for belonging between breaths. That night haunts your spine. They never asked if you were ready. You folded your wings beneath someone's shadow. You said yes because no had always been punished. The room became your funeral long before they left. Your softness was never the problem. Their blindness was. You learned to ache quietly. You didn't want to be touched. You wanted to be safe. You silenced your knowing. God is reviving it. They saw your body. God saw your breaking. You confused control for closeness. You weren't promiscuous. You were abandoned and still trying. You needed love, not lessons. Your soul whispered no. Your mouth whispered please. That bed was never your home. You learned to flinch from affection. They touched you like you were temporary. You let go of God to hold on to them. You erased your boundaries to keep their attention. You gave them access to what they never respected. They never asked how you felt afterward. You walked out whole and still wondered if you were too much. You confused being wanted with being worthy. You gave away your breath for borrowed affection. You wept silently while they slept beside you. You needed sacred. They offered shame. God is exposing the bed that stole your voice. That room witnessed the end of your pretending. You didn't lose your light. It was stolen in pieces. You begged for forever from someone only passing through. You disappeared between sheets, never made for you. You were always holy, even when you forgot. You let them love your pain, but not your healing. You traded your truth for temporary touch. You gave them heaven. They fed you hunger. You kissed them and tasted every betrayal. That wasn't your shame to carry. God stayed when everyone else left. If this touched your soul, don't scroll. Comment your favorite quote and subscribe for more.